3 new sitcoms and a Silence of the Lambs spin-off of sorts, sequel if you will, Clarice over on CBS. Let's talk TV. Hey everybody, Dan here. This is Dan Reviews It. Welcome to TV News and Reviews for the week. We've got a lot to talk about. Only 4 new shows though, so we're going to dive a little bit deeper maybe into those. Some star power behind them though, for sure. We've got Kenan Thompson's new show on NBC called Kenan, and also Dwayne Johnson's new show on NBC about his young life. It's called Young Rock. And as well, Kevin James and his latest attempt at sitcom glory with The Crew over on Netflix. And we've also got, like I said, CBS and their new show Clarice, a sequel of sorts to Silence of the Lambs. But we have a lot of news to get to first, so let's talk about that. We've got a lot of reboots, and CBS has given some renewals and series ending orders. But before we dive into any of that, I want to talk about the one that is nearest and dearest to my heart on the cancellation block. Brooklyn Nine-Nine will be ending again. You know, Fox already canceled it a few years ago, but NBC picked it up for the last couple of seasons, and it will have a 10-episode season 8. Not even this year. It's not going to air until 2021-2022 TV season. So either in the fall or maybe even as a winter series, and then we'll end like around April or May. I'm not sure, but I love this show. However, it's been widely reported that they have had some issues moving forward with the season because it is a sitcom, but they also want to stay true to the mood of the country right now and everything, and so they had scrapped the first 4 episodes that they wrote for the original season 8 after the George Floyd killing and all the uprising with that last summer, because they were like, look, we have to tread delicately on how to be a comedy show dealing with the police, and maybe it's not in a true fashion. I mean, it's certainly a silly show, but one thing I've always loved about Brooklyn Nine-Nine is that it isn't afraid to necessarily shy away from some of the riskier topics as well. So I will definitely miss that show. Love that Brooklyn Nine-Nine. But once this show leaves, because they're already losing Superstore in a couple of weeks, I guess, or a couple of months, they already lost the Will and Grace revival. And when I say lost, I mean canceled, ended the series, whatever. But once Brooklyn Nine-Nine leaves, as long as this one gets renewed, Zoey's Extraordinary Playlist will be NBC's longest-running comedy. It's in Season 2 currently. So if it gets renewed for Season 3, once Brooklyn Nine-Nine leaves, Zoey will be the longest-running current comedy on NBC, which is just fascinating. I mean, when I was a kid, NBC was the home for all the comedies and the long-running comedies as well. Cheers with 11 seasons. Cosby Show, I had 8 or 9. Family Ties ran a while. Facts of Life ran like 9 seasons. So it's very odd that their longest-running show is going to be, at least in the comedy department, is only going to be 3 seasons. I guess you could sort of consider Good Girls a comedy, but I would say it's definitely more drama than comedy, but dramedy, if anything. So that would be in Season 4, I think, next year. But anyway, let's talk about the CBS stuff. So Bob Hearts Abishola and The Neighborhood both renewed for Seasons 3 and 4, respectively. And that makes sense. They're always doing well with the laugh track sitcoms. And usually they do film in front of a live studio audience, but this past season they actually have been quite literally laugh track sitcoms because there's been no live audience due to COVID restrictions. So really I don't think any of the comedies that are on currently, The Conners, and I don't think any of those have live audiences right now, but they usually do. And ending will be Mom after the current season, which is number 8. The season finale, which will now be the series finale, will be on May 6th. And that's a show that I still follow. I still really like it. I haven't seen any of the new season once Anna Faris has left. She's not on the show anymore, and obviously maybe there were some struggles with storylines to continue. I mean, she was one of the 2 stars of the show. It was definitely sort of a double header between her and Allison Janney. But I've always enjoyed Mom, but 8 seasons is probably enough for it. I don't think we need to go on, 11 years with it. And then, this is interesting, NCIS New Orleans is also going to end after its current season. So that ends May 16th, and it's season 7, but that is going to be gone. And NCIS, usually one of the strong ratings stalwarts for CBS, but not to worry, fans, because NCIS Hawaii, it's not confirmed yet, but it's very, very close, apparently, to being picked up. So we could have a new NCIS on the way there. And please don't mind if you hear the snow shoveling in the background. It snowed all night, and the crews are out wiping up. So, okay, moving on to some other news. Muppets is now on Disney Plus. The original 5 seasons of The Muppet Show from the late 70s and early 80s, which is really great because the last 1 or 2 seasons were never released on DVD. I have the first few on DVD, but even then, some of the episodes were cut for some music rights and stuff. Disney Plus has almost everything. There's a couple of episodes missing from season 5. One of them is Brooke Shields. The other one is, I forget the guy's name, but he ended up being like a child molester or something, so they were like, let's not put this up. So those 2 are missing. And then there's a few episodes with missing musical number here or there or something like that because of licensing rights. But over 100 of the 120 episodes are there completely 100% intact. And so that is really great. However, it is interesting that they put up a disclaimer, and Disney Plus has been doing this a lot more lately. When it launched, not so much, but then over the last few months, they added one for Peter Pan and the Aristocats and certain things that may have less than flattering portrayals of some ethnic groups and what have you. So they put the standard disclaimer on Muppets as well. It says this program includes negative depictions and or mistreatment of people or cultures. These stereotypes are wrong then and are wrong now. Rather than remove this content, we want to acknowledge its harmful impact, learn from it, and spark conversations to create a more inclusive future together. Now, look, I don't think there's anything really wrong with the Muppets, and certainly people have said on Facebook over the last couple of days, that I follow, like, what's wrong with this? I watched this whole episode and I don't really get it. What's the difference? But I think they've put it in front of every episode. And look, it was the 70s. It was certainly a different time. The only thing I can really think of is things like maybe the Swedish Chef might be a little bit, I don't know, racist towards Swedes. I'm not really sure. Because you can't understand him and her, I'm not going to do the bit, but you know what I mean. He sort of talks funny and you can't understand him, and I don't know if that was part of it, but like certainly, I mean, there's nobody going on there doing blackface or anything. Like when I think of Peter Pan, like I think, okay, yes, the Indians and the Red Band song and all of that. I don't know. To me, Muppets is a little different, but look, I'm just glad that instead of cutting the episodes up, they put them up as is with the disclaimer. I wish they would do that with some of their other projects like Song of the South. Probably never going to happen. But other than the musical elements of some episodes that have been unable to get licenses for, all the episodes are up intact, and I really, really do appreciate that. So good on them. So coming to Peacock, we have a whole bunch of new shows just announced for Peacock, and there's going to be a 6-part true crime series about John Wayne Gacy. That's going to premiere on March 25th. That's already done. And then just announced that they're going to be producing is a 3-part series about Michael Phelps, which should be interesting. I mean, he obviously had a little bit of trouble with his image. He was smoking pot and stuff back when that was a little more taboo. But, I think his story is very interesting, and it's certainly very inspiring, so that should be good. There's going to be a show called X-Rated, EX-Rated, with Andy Cohen, that, of course, he's part of the whole NBC Universal family with Bravo, or is it E? I think they're both NBC. I don't know. I forget which one he's on. He might be on E. But either way, this is called X-Rated, and it's about basically talking to people's exes, like specific people, and finding out basically the ex saying why they broke it off. It sounds sort of mean-spirited, but at the same time, I don't know. I actually think the way people break up with each other is a little bit too nice, because, if you don't know what's wrong with the situation, you never learn from it. So, the people I've broken up with, it's usually been like, look, da 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 da, and I sugarcoat things, but I do usually tell them, like, okay, X, Y, and Z has been the issue. So I think this could be interesting. I think it's probably going to be a little trashy, but it might be interesting. And then Craig Robinson, who is currently, of course, the host of The Masked Dancer, but he has a long history with NBC with The Office. There's going to be a 10-episode sitcom of his coming with Brooklyn Nine-Nine co-creator Dan Gore. I don't know if he is creating this or writing it or whatever, but he's going to be involved with it somehow, which makes sense with Brooklyn Nine-Nine ending. And Craig Robinson has had a few episodes on Brooklyn Nine-Nine as Doug Judy, one of the, foes of the Andy Samberg character, Peralta. So that could certainly be interesting. I am honestly a little hit or miss on Craig Robinson. I don't think he's a great host on The Masked Dancer. I think he's okay. I think he was very funny on The Office. He had another sitcom, and I forget if it was on Netflix or NBC, but it was called, like, Mr. Robinson, or Mr. Robinson's Classroom or something, and he was a teacher, and it was very bad. I think I lasted, like, an episode and a half. It was shortly before I started doing these reviews, so I didn't actually review it for the show, but it was not good. All right, so let's move on to this week in reboots. A lot, actually, to talk about. I think there's some very interesting ones, too. So, from the movie world, True Lies has been commissioned as a pilot for CBS from Matt Nix, who created Burn Notice. Very popular show on USA. I've never seen the movie True Lies, but I hear it is one of Schwarzenegger's best. A lot of people have told me that. And I like Jamie Lee Curtis. I should watch it at some point. I love James Cameron. So I should probably check that out before this show comes on if it does get approved for series. But, from what I know about the plot, I think that could be very interesting for a series conceit. So we'll see about that. Nobody is attached to it yet in terms of acting. But we'll see about that. Now, we do have some acting people that we know about for this one, and this is another movie as well, another action movie too, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, and I think it might have been a movie before that. I think it was a movie in like the 50s or something too, but it's coming to Amazon in 2022, and the two stars are two very popular people, Donald Glover and Phoebe Waller-Bridge. Now, that could be a recipe for success. That's another movie I've not seen. I've heard good things. And another one that I could see being some sort of series. They haven't given how many episodes will be in it, but it is coming to Amazon in 2022, so that should be interesting. And then back to some TV stuff, TV reboots and such, not from movies, but CSI is possibly returning with original stars William Peterson and Georgia Fox, and newcomers Matt Lauria from Friday Night Lights, Paula Newsome, and Mel Rodriguez. Now, I have never seen more than a few seconds, probably, of CSI. These are not my kind of shows. The whole thing with the, the procedural, and every episode's basically the same, and da-da-da-da. I don't really do those kind of shows. I don't find them engaging. But obviously, CSI was hugely popular. I think it was the #1 show for several TV seasons, and if it wasn't #1, it was certainly #1 scripted show behind American Idol, because when it first started, it was just a juggernaut, and it lasted many, many years. So, why are they returning to CSI with the originals? I don't know. I guess maybe, are there any CSIs on anymore? Maybe there's not. Maybe that's why. I was thinking there was still one CSI that was on, but maybe that's not true. And William Peterson was the one that I think that left it originally, that like they were like, oh, let's replace him, like he's the big star, and then it only lasted a few more years, I think, because then they were doing all the other spin-offs. I could be wrong, because I don't really follow these CSI shows as much as some people, but if you're a fan of that, that is probably some welcome news for you. This one I thought was interesting. So The Real World, the old MTV reality show from the early 90s, really one of the creators of the reality genre, certainly I think, the creator of the current reality landscape that came since the 90s. But MTV retired that show a few years ago, but of course they are part of Paramount, and Paramount Plus now is about to debut. CBS All Access is going to turn into Paramount Plus, basically, and that's on March 4th. And on that day, March 4th, they are debuting a new Real World, and this is very interesting, I think. It's called Real World Homecoming New York, and they are taking the first season cast from 30 years ago, I guess. I think it was 1990 was the first season, maybe. And maybe 91, so maybe it is 30 years exactly. But these same people, maybe not all of them, because I only read 6 names, and I thought Real World had 8. So maybe not everybody's returning. Maybe not everybody's still alive, to be honest. I know over the years there have been a few cast members that have passed away. But anyway, there's going to be the majority, anyway, of the original New York cast, and they're doing it basically again in an apartment in New York, and they're going to live together and whatever. But now they're 30 years on. Obviously, you can't show that on MTV because MTV's target demo is still, teenagers, young 20s, and these guys have got to be in their 50s by now. But I didn't actually watch the first season. The season I watched was 2 or 3, whatever, like Pedro and Puck were on. Pedro, of course, was such a big deal because he had HIV, and that was like, nobody on a show had HIV that was a regular character, so it was like, and this is the real world, literally, so that was my season, but I feel like I know some of the people from New York just from, reunions or other MTV shows or whatever, so it's certainly an interesting concept. Paramount Plus is really trying to throw everything at the wall here, because CBS All Access, I think, I don't know if it was a failure, like it wasn't Quibi, but certainly has not gotten the push that it has wanted or has thought that it might get over the last couple of years. So should be interesting when that debuts in March. And I guess I'll cover it. I guess that's in like 2 weeks. So I guess I'll be talking to you about the Real World Homecoming New York then. And finally in reboots, we've got a new Addams Family show. I think this has been talked about before. I may have mentioned it a few weeks ago or months ago when it was first announced, but Netflix has got it, and we've got some more information about it. It is a live-action series. It's an 8-episode series, and Tim Burton is going to be the producer of this. I don't know if he's directing it, but he's certainly producing, and it's called Wednesday, and it's being described as a sleuthing, supernaturally infused mystery drama charting Wednesday Addams' years as a student at Nevermore Academy and her attempts to master her emerging psychic ability, as well as thwart a monstrous killing spree terrorizing the local town. So this should be very interesting. I love Addams Family lore. I have really enjoyed the many projects over the years. I didn't get to see the Broadway show, but I just actually recently watched the first movie for the first time a few months ago, but I've always loved the original 60s show and the cartoon show from the 70s from Hanna-Barbera. And I really liked the animated movie they did in 2019 as well. So I'm always all in on some Addams Family. So that should be interesting. No date yet on when that is coming, but soon, I guess, from Tim Burton. So let's move into the reviews, like I said, just for this week. But they're 4 pretty big named titles, I think. And I think they're going to be interesting to talk about. So first up is Clarice. This is on CBS, and it stars Rebecca Breeds as the Clarice character. Now, if you know anything about Silence of the Lambs, I don't need to go into too much detail other than that it basically takes place a couple of years after the Silence of the Lambs events set in the early 90s, and basically it's a deep dive into Clarice's personal experiences, her psyche, all of that kind of things, as she returns to the FBI to pursue some serial murders and sexual predators, while also navigating the high-stakes political world of DC. And she's, getting some static from her higher-ups, and she also is involved in some ways still with the victim of Buffalo Bill from the film, Catherine Martin, who's played here by Marnie Carpenter. And they have like a very odd sort of relationship where Clarice wants to sort of move on, but obviously Catherine, she kind of saved Catherine's life, but at the same time Catherine sort of, holds some grudges over some things that they talk about a little bit in the pilot episode. Cal Penn appears in this show as well. Always love seeing him. He really runs the gamut. I mean, he just did Sunnyside last season, and then he was previously on House, and then, of course, he did Harold and Kumar when he was younger, and then Designated Survivor. So he really runs the gamut. And, of course, his political affiliation with the Barack Obama White House, I think, informed some of his roles as well. But, he was only in a couple of scenes in this first episode, so hard to really talk too much about him. But what's interesting about me watching this show right now is, okay, so Silence of the Lambs is kind of hot right now because this month is the 30th anniversary of the film. And it's also the 20th anniversary of the film Hannibal, both of which, plug, I will be discussing with my buddy Joe in Dan's big movie review for the month. We always take a big anniversary of a film and sort of pair it with something else. So we already watched, actually, last week, Silence of the Lambs and Hannibal. And we're also going to watch Red Dragon, too, because they are all sort of related. So we're going to review all three of those movies coming up probably sometime this week. I mean, February is the anniversary, so we'll try and get it out soon. But anyway, because I just watched Silence of the Lambs, it reminded me of everything, going on in that movie. I'd seen it before a few times, but so with Clarice, everything was fresh in my mind. I watched this show probably 2 days after I watched the movie, so everything's very fresh. And the one thing that really sticks out, kind of like a sore thumb in this show, is the representation of the Clarice character by Rebecca Breeds. I've seen her in other things, and she's an okay actress. I don't have anything against her, as an actress, but she really, really is trying to channel the Jodie Foster interpretation of this character. She's doing the, same kind of pentameter. She's got the same accent. She calls everybody sir every other sentence. And because this is so intrinsically linked to Silence of the Lambs, the film, it's impossible to kind of view it as anything but sort of a copycat, like a lesser than copycat of the movie. They spend most of this first episode talking about Buffalo Bill and what happened. And Clarice, you really shouldn't have gone in that house, and what happened in that case. Now, if you've never seen Silence of the Lambs, I think actually you might be a bit lost. They fill in some gaps so that they give you enough that if you've never seen it, you won't be completely in the dark. But I think a lot of things they talk about in this, certainly in the pilot, if you haven't seen Silence of the Lambs, I think you'd be a little confused by. And then just this interpretation of the Jodie Foster character. So, like I said, we watched Hannibal as well with Silence of the Lambs, which, by the way, now that we've wrapped up Freaks and Geeks Fridays on my channel, Joe and I are going to be tackling the series Hannibal. And we decided that months ago, long before I think I even knew that there was a show called Clarice coming out, and long before we thought about, it's the anniversary of Silence of the Lambs next year, we just had never seen the show Hannibal and wanted to watch it. So we are going to review that show coming up this year, but very soon probably. But the movie Hannibal is Julianne Moore as the Clarice character, and it was sort of like 10 years, 12 years on, so Clarice sort of grew a little bit as a character, and so she doesn't have quite the same mannerisms, quite the same accent, But it was to me, Julianne Moore doing an interpretation of the character, not of Jodie Foster's version of the character. And this, to me, is her version of Jodie Foster's character. It would have been, I think, a lot more interesting if she had done her own interpretation of the character. We've seen so many different things, especially on CBS, really. There, Magnum PI, MacGyver, The Equalizer that we just reviewed last week with Queen Latifah. These are all properties from the 80s and 90s, and everybody that's starring in it is bringing a completely different skill set to the character. Yes, I'm still playing MacGyver. Yes, I'm still playing Thomas Magnum, but I'm not being Tom Selleck. I'm not doing a Richard Dean Anderson impression. And that's, to me, all this woman is doing. And she's, like I said, I've seen her in other things, and she's fine. But, she really is just, this is my impression of Jodie Foster's version of the character. The character is from a book, you could just, I'm sure Jodie Foster's version of the character wasn't letter perfect to the book. I don't know. I didn't read it, but usually there's some differences. Take some liberties with the character, and I think it will open up some new worlds. So that's one of my main issues. The other one, I think, is if you haven't seen Silence of the Lambs, I think you're going to be lost, especially in this first episode. Now, as they move forward in the season, I hope that the Buffalo Bill storyline is not the main focal point like it was in the pilot. But in that case, if it's not, we need to give Clarice something so it's not just then a generic CBS serial or a non-serialized procedural show. Because those are a dime a dozen over on CBS, and what is setting them apart? So this to me was a miss. It may get better as the season goes on, but I don't think I'll stick with it to find out. I mean, if it gets on a bunch of critics' year-end lists or gets a bunch of Emmy nominations, none of that's going to happen. But if it did, I guess maybe I would rethink it. But I just don't think there's anything here either for the Silence of the Lambs fan, because I think you'll be so annoyed about the Jodie Foster impression, or for non-Silence of the Lambs fans, because it's almost so inside that it loses people. So this to me was a miss. I will give it that some of the other performances were interesting. And I do like sort of the concept of bringing back the Catherine character and where she is today. I sort of like that concept, but overall, I don't think this will be one for the ages. I leave Clarice with a C-. So up next, we're going to talk about all the sitcoms here. Let's go to NBC Tuesdays, because that is where you can find Kenan and Young Rock. I guess I'll talk about them separately like I usually do, but there's certainly some similarities between the two. So Kenan comes on first, so let's talk about that. So this is Kenan Thompson and Chris Redd from SNL, and they're filming it in LA, so they're flying back and forth on show weeks for SNL to do both. Now, Kenan has been a part of SNL longer than anybody by years. I think he's been on, I'm not sure if it's 18, 19 years. It could be 20 years even. I mean, he's been on a long darn time. Like, when I think about the first cast he was on with, like, Tim Meadows was still on. That's a long time ago. But anyway, so he is playing a single dad here, a widower. His wife just recently had passed. And he is a father of two daughters, played by Danny Lane and Dana Lane. So I have to assume that they're real-life siblings. And they're living in Atlanta, Georgia. He's got his father-in-law, Don Johnson, who's now living with them, and Gary, who is his brother, played by Chris Redd. And they, all live together. Well, I don't know if Chris Redd's character lives there. I'm not sure if that was established in the pilot. Don Johnson's character certainly lives there, though. But anyway, so he is like the host on this show called, Wake Up with Kenan, I think. Local Atlanta morning show, basically. And some of his crew members include Kimmery Lewis, who we've seen in a few things, and Fortune Feimster, who I always like. She plays the sportscaster on the show, and I just saw her actually in Barb and Star go to Vista Del Mar. She's always pretty funny. And basically, everybody's sort of helping Kenan struggle with the loss of the wife, while he's trying to sort of hold everything together in his own life, for his daughters. On the show, he sort of has a couple of meltdowns on the show, where they start talking about his ex-wife and, I shouldn't say his ex-wife, but, his wife, his deceased wife, and it sort of, hit some emotional points for him. I think this is going to be a good show, but it's not yet. So I'm sometimes you have to do this with TV, because it's not a movie where it's like, okay, 2 hours done, let's review it for what it was. Sometimes you do review, TV shows on their potential. And first of all, I thought this looked horrible from the ads. They played the same ads over and over again. There was like 4 different jokes that they would, play in different ads, and none of them were funny. I was like, what is this show even about? And proven by the first scene of the pilot, I was like wondering why it wasn't a laugh track sitcom, because the setups and the way it was being played was for a laugh track. I mean, it really, like, even the pauses that, like, Chris Redd would take after a line, like, it was very like, okay, where's the studio audience here? And it's not that. It's a single camera sitcom. Look, NBC, other than the Will and Grace revival, NBC's been out of the multi-camera game for a couple of years. I think their last attempt was Abby's, which I actually thought was a really good show. It got canceled, of course, after 13 episodes or 10 episodes. But, you know, I was like wondering, because look, Kenan's used to doing things in front of an audience, and so is Chris Redd. Chris Redd, other than SNL, is known for his stand-up. So they're both used to doing a lot of things in front of studio audiences. So the fact that the first scene seemed like it should have been wasn't really surprising to me. But as the show progressed, I was like, okay, the show's actually got some different layers. There's some interesting character work here. But it still isn't that funny. I laughed a few times. I did. In fact, I laughed, I think, in this more than I did in Young Rock, which we'll talk about next. But I think the key of this show is it is more about family. You know, look, it's an 8 o'clock show on a Tuesday night. It's, sort of the family hour. I know that doesn't much exist anymore, but this is, no doubt about it, a family show. It's rated TV PG. There's nothing, that bawdy in this show, at least not yet. And I think it's really good to talk about some of these topics about dealing with loss, and that kind of thing, and how, Kenan's dealing with it in one way, his family is dealing with it in another way, and they're sort of butting heads about how to deal with it, how to deal with his daughters, etc., etc. I think that stuff is all very interesting. I think the show needs to get funnier, but again, I think it's got the threads of something, but it's just not quite there yet. So I'm going to leave Kenan for now with a B, because I really do see a lot of potential here. The pilot didn't quite do it for me, though, so I'm looking forward to the next few weeks. Hopefully that can maintain. Like, if I'm grading the pilot by itself, it's probably more like a B- or something. But I always tend to grade it, especially sitcom pilots, on a curve, because a lot of the humor comes once we know the characters, I think, more than anything on a sitcom. So let's move into now the Young Rock. Dwayne Johnson is heading up this show. And I actually thought this was going to be more like Everybody Hates Chris, where he's just sort of the narrator off camera talking about his life growing up. But it's not. It is actually, it takes place sort of in, 10 years from now is like present day. So it takes place in a little while, and he's running for either president or governor or something. And Randall Park is playing himself, interviewing him, talking about his young life. So the sort of flashbacks within that cover the bulk of the show, 85% of the show, is the flashbacks to the 80s. And there's actually 3 different actors that are playing younger versions of Dwayne Johnson. So one is like 10 to 12, one's later teens, and then one is early 20s. And so, it's an interesting layered show, because there's a lot of, even though they're all The Rock, I mean, there's many, many different people playing that character. I guess I should give you the names of them. Not that you'll really know, I don't think, any of them, but Adrian Grolix, Bradley Constant, and Uli Latukafu plays the 3 different versions of the character. And so it's very interesting. And then, of course, he's playing himself 10 years from now. Like I said, I didn't laugh as much in this show as I did even in Kenan, which only gave me really maybe 3 or 4 laughs. But this is certainly an interesting show. I go back and forth on whether I'm kind of over Dwayne Johnson or not. I think the Fast and the Furious franchise is getting old. I think a lot of his action movies are getting old, like Rampage and San Andreas, and all of those sort of blend together after a while. But I still think he's a likable dude. I thought he was funny in the second Jumanji movie. Like, I still think he can do good things, and I think this is going to be one of them. I think this is going to be another show that people can watch with the family, and some of us in the older generation, I think, will appreciate the wrestling references from the 80s. Just in the pilot alone, there's people playing Junkyard Dog, Iron Sheik, Andre the Giant, as well as his own father, who was a wrestler, Rocky Johnson, played by Joseph Lee Anderson here in the show. So that's how, at 10, he was like hanging out with Iron Sheik and stuff. I think this has a lot of potential as well. I think as a pilot, it works better than Kenan for what the show is going to be. But I don't think it's going to be as laugh out loud funny, as knee-slappingly funny as Kenan has the potential to be. And you know what? I think that makes sense, because when I think about some of these shows where we're looking back on our childhood, Wonder Years was never a knee slapper of a show. It had some jokes, but I think it was more about sort of the realism. Here, I think it's sort of an exaggerated realism, a little bit like Everybody Hates Chris was. But I think these guys and kids that are all playing the earlier versions of Dwayne Johnson, I think they all do a good job. And what's interesting is, unlike Clarice, where she's just doing a Jodie Foster routine, they all sort of have different interpretations of The Rock, which makes sense because, look, you're a lot different from 10 than you are at 21. And at 15, you're sort of finding out who you are, finding out what works for you. And so it actually kind of is endearing that these three guys are all they're all kind of smooth. They all have sort of early ideas of what Dwayne Johnson will become as The Rock. But I do think it's very interesting in that aspect. Now, the one thing I really actually don't like about it is the stuff with the real-life Dwayne Johnson and Randall Park. It bookends the show, and they talk a little bit in the middle, too. But I didn't find that to be enjoyable. I didn't find it to be clever. Like, it was just, first of all, I think it dates the show. I mean, I think in 10, 15, 20 years, people will still be watching Everybody Hates Chris, and they should, because it's a very, very underrated, funny show. But people will still be, I think, finding that show on streamers and whatever, and because it takes place in a certain place and time, it's not dated. But here, right away, we see that it's, 2028 or whatever it is, and Dwayne Johnson's, it's like, in 10 years from now, people could watch this and be like, well, that's so silly and so stupid. And it is stupid, because it wasn't funny. And why do him and Randall Park look exactly the same 8 or 10 years from now? There was no, like, makeup to, like, give them a wrinkle or two, it just is, that was an unenjoyable part of the show for me. So this was a bit of a mixed bag, but the stuff about the actual young Rock, I think, is engaging, and going through sort of different facets of his life, I think, is pretty clever. So I'm going to also leave Young Rock with a B. I think it's, it's another one that I think it has potential. Really, I think, and hopefully, because of his film schedule, maybe he'll be less freed up to do these bits. I hope they sort of, as we move on, drop that conceit a little bit. Because if the show lasts 5 years, what are these? All stories that he's telling Randall Park? Everybody Hates Chris, he was just telling us, the audience, about his life. So I'm going to leave this one with a B as well. I think the 80-85% of the show that is the younger stuff is great. I think they really need to sort of curtail the other stuff. So finally, let's talk about The Crew on Netflix with Kevin James. Now, I go back and forth on my fandom for Kevin James. I think King of Queens is, to use the word underrated again, I think it's very underrated. Yes, it's runs endlessly in reruns, but, it never got critical success. It never got any awards. But I think it's a damn funny show. I still really enjoy King of Queens. His second show, Kevin Can Wait, I thought was not good. Partially because it was just King of Queens again. Half of the cast was the same, especially in season 2, once they killed off his wife and brought Leah Remini in as the new love interest. I was like, well, this is ridiculous. So, hated Kevin Can Wait. But his movies are sort of touch and go. I don't like most of the Sandler stuff. I thought Here Comes the Boom was good, but, I don't really care that much for the Paul Blart movies, etc. So I was definitely weary and leery when I saw that he had a new show on Netflix. However, I got to tell you, now, I don't usually do the binging, but I was like, I want to give this the benefit of the doubt here. I thought the first episode was actually pretty funny, so I was like, all right, I'm going to watch more of this and see where we're at here. So I've actually watched now 7 of the 10 episodes that are up over the course of like 4 or 5 days. I would watch just 1 or 2 a night before bed. And it is definitely not a rehash of King of Queens at all. It is a NASCAR related show. He plays the crew chief of a NASCAR team, NASCAR garage, whatever. And NASCAR is giving their full blessing for the show. They're one of the like producers, NASCAR Productions or whatever. So they've got the blessing of that to talk about a lot of the people. There's a couple of cameos from people that I don't necessarily know, but people do, I guess, that follow NASCAR. But you don't have to follow NASCAR at all to enjoy this show. This is a funny show. I am shocked to say it. Now, Kevin himself isn't much of a different character than he was as Doug on King of Queens. He has all the same, sort of line reads and the same sense of humor and that kind of thing. But you know what? Worked for me on King of Queens. It works for me here as well. Especially since now we're about 15 years out from the finale of King of Queens. So it's definitely been a while. But this is, I think, going to become a pretty solid show with a big cast. I think King of Queens was definitely like, him and Carrie, and definitely you had Jerry Stiller in there as well. But I don't think I would call that an ensemble show, because I think the people that sort of came in and out of that show weren't as sort of integral. But here, in the first episode, they get a new boss, and so he's like worried about that with the rest of the crew, and the young and dumb driver. He's a great driver, but he's an idiot. It's kind of classic trope, but he's funny in spurts, and the sort of rivalry between Kevin and the new boss is pretty funny. I laugh certainly several times in each episode. And one thing I really like about Kevin James, and I should say this is a multi-camera show, this is a laugh track show, and I think it needs to be. I think it's got that vibe. And this is, I think, a classic ensemble type show. Is it going to be up there with, the Cheers? Is it the Mary Tyler Moores of the day? No. But, the truth is, the only sitcom with a laugh track that I still really enjoy, and aside from the Connors, because that's sort of its own thing, it's a reboot, and of course, whatever. But I really do like The Neighborhood with Cedric the Entertainer and Max Greenfield on CBS. I really do. And I still watch Mom, but Mom I watch more because I like the characters now. It's not as funny as it used to be, like, by leaps and bounds. But I sort of, grew with the characters over the years, whatever. So I still watch Mom. But in terms of shows with laugh tracks that make me genuinely laugh, it's The Neighborhood, and now, believe it or not, The Crew. And look, it's not necessarily smart writing. It goes back to classic sitcom tropes over the years for sure. But you know what? There's actually nothing wrong with that. I think we've conditioned ourselves now to, if it has a laugh track, it has to be really stupid, or whatever. And I don't necessarily think that's true. Yes, a lot of my favorite shows of the last 10, 15 years are, 30 Rock, The Office, The Middle, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Mrs. Maisel, shows that don't have studio audiences, and that's fine. But look, this kind of stuff harkens back to my childhood for sure. And the other thing I really like about it is, for a Netflix show, it's clean. I mean, yeah, there's a couple of sex jokes, but it's rated TV 14, unlike things like The Ranch, where, we're on Netflix, we can curse and say whatever we want, da-da-da-da-da. This is honestly a show that you could just, watch with your family and have a few laughs and enjoy it. I think if we're thinking a little too highly of ourselves and, we're too good for this kind of show, then I don't think you're going to give it a chance, which is unfortunate. But if you like King of Queens, and you like, Everybody Loves Raymond, and a lot of the more recent studio audience type sitcoms, not necessarily the Chuck Lorre, Big Bang Theories and stuff, because I think that's sort of in its own category, but things like King of Queens and stuff, I think you will really enjoy The Crew, as I did. So, generic as it is, yes, I definitely laughed, and I will be looking forward if they renew this for a season 2. So I give The Crew a B+. So pretty good on the comedy front. We haven't really had a lot of good comedies so far this TV season. Of course, most of them didn't get to premiere because of COVID. But Call Your Mother, I didn't think was very good. Be Positive, I thought was okay. So I was very happy with this week's run of shows. So next week we'll have, I think there's another pretty big show premiering this week. I can't think of what it is now, but coming up very soon we'll have some stuff on Paramount Plus to talk about. And I don't know what else is coming up. It's so hard to tell with COVID, like with things being pushed back and stuff. But yeah, we'll see. Either way, there'll be some news, there'll be some reviews, and it'll be about TV. So thank you for joining me, and we'll see you back here next time. Bye.